This is Diane DeMille with DEA Agent Spiritual Journey and Other True Crimes. This episode is a podcast interview with Randy Torgerson. Randy is one of the co-authors for Path of the Devil, and he is one of the private investigators who worked on the case in Yuma, Arizona, written about in Path of the Devil, Camino del Diablo, and also Fighting My Greatest Enemy, Myself. Because Randy is a private investigator, we want to keep his identity secure. Therefore, you will not be able to see his face very clearly on this video. So Randy, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you're doing?
All right, well, I'm Randy Torgerson. I'm a private investigator. I've been licensed as an investigator since 2000. Worked for a private investigation company when I met Larry back in 1991, I believe it was, and have worked so many different kinds of cases between then and now. Since 2000, actually, after I got licensed, I've had my own business. I have taken my experiences that were largely gathered from the story that we told in Path of the Devil, and a lot of things that I've learned, how to deal with law enforcement. I'm also prior law enforcement myself, so I have that advantage. And there's just all kinds of cases. I've been very fortunate in the kinds of cases that I've gotten to work since 2000. My little claim to fame right at the moment is I can say that I've climbed Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines to the top of the volcano. I've been to Mount Fuji in Japan. And as of last year, I've been to the Great Wall in China. Those are my big claims. All of them except for Mount Pinatubo was case related.
Okay, you talked a little bit about who you are and how you got involved in working as a private investigator. So what do you want people to know about you or about your work?
I want people to know that both Larry, Jeff, and I, Jeff Pearce, we don't put money first. Our integrity is what's important to us. And it's kind of the reason I think we started Path of the Devil. I think it's a big reason Larry went on to expand on his life to show how he was raised and how we've come to have integrity. And in fact, we were prior to this call just discussing the case a little bit and coming to some realizations this many years later, how they tried to stop the case. They tried to stop it with so many people, but not come directly to Larry, because they knew that Larry wouldn't step down for a dumb reason or a crooked reason. But if they could get other people around him to shut him out, that was in their mind their way to shut the case down.
So in other words, the three of you really kept focus on your own integrity in the work that you were doing.
We had one goal, and it was to catch the bad guy. That was it. Not how long can we make the case last, not can we make more adventure. I mean, it was all about producing the bad guy, catching the bad guy. That's what it was all about. Larry couldn't be bought off, and I guess apparently we couldn't either, because we had a big enough budget. It wasn't an issue of money. It was an issue of trying to see it through.
So why are you telling your stories at this time?
Because what we learned during that time was so wrong. So wrong. That people need to hear it from the grunts that are working in the field, not some story that the politicians make up, but to hear it from the guys that were there doing the work. And also, I think it's a unique perspective to have licensed private investigators working with law enforcement in such a capacity that things could get done. You know, it wasn't a hindrance. We didn't hinder his case. He didn't hinder our case. It was a collaboration between this public and private entity that has gotten stronger, with a little segue into that aspect of it. Prior to the late 60s, early 70s, there was no licensing for private investigators. Cops retired. Cops didn't have anything else to do, didn't know what else to do. They opened up their shingle and became private investigators through osmosis.
So how did you become a private investigator? What was your motive?
Well, my motive actually, when I was in law enforcement, I had a friend who got injured and retired early, and started a private investigation company in Kansas City. And I ultimately did take him up on it for about a year. And then he lost a big government state contract doing workers' comp cases and things like that. And then I ended up meeting my last wife, and then we moved to California. And then when I came to California, the second day I was here, I went into the Pearce Corporation's office and asked them, if they had any openings. And Jerry Pearce told me to come. That was on a Friday. He told me to come back Monday and let's try you out. I ended up being there for about almost 9 years. And March 2000, I went out on my own.
Okay, so you've been a co-author of the book, Path of the Devil. How else are you getting your story out there? Or are you also doing other things?
As you may be aware, we have printed bookmarks. We have the books themselves that we self-published. I think Larry, being retired, he's got a little more extra time to do more things, but we do book signings, just people that we meet. We have websites. I don't know a lot about Facebook, but my company has a Facebook page. Every once in a while, I go on there and promote it. I have something on my business website in the blog section that will occasionally pump out something about the book. I even mentioned Larry's own book. So, we do what we can. And on top of that, I meet clients every once in a while that have connections because we'd love to make a movie out of this. While I think all of us are looking for that opportunity, sometimes I have a little more opportunity because of who my clients are. So, I'm always trying to push it. I've got an in with a few different people, but, getting them to respond sometimes is a slow process.
So how did you get started in writing the book, Path of the Devil?
Even back in the 90s, while we were still working the case, we thought, someday this is just a story that's got to be told. I remember Larry telling us periodically that, man, I want to do it. I got to wait 5 years after I retire before I can legally do it. And then after he retired, we pushed him a little bit to say, look, I know you got to wait 5 years to publish a book, but we don't have to wait 5 years to write it. Let's get started because it ain't going to happen overnight. And so we got started maybe year 4 of his retirement, somewhere in there. By the time we were able to get it published, we were past that 5-year mark. But yeah, we've talked about it 100 times since probably at least since 1996.
What are you grateful for in your life because of your experiences?
My business today and the knowledge that I've not only accumulated, but the one thing that case has done for me, besides being general in experience, yes, got experience dealing with things that most people probably never would. But that case actually taught me how to get more experience. It taught me how to further answering questions that came up because I wasn't satisfied with the answers we initially got. So we learned how to investigate. I guess that's the best way to say it. So yes, it's experience, but it's kind of like teaching you how to fish instead of feeding you a fish for the day. That's the only part of the Bible I really know much about. It's been overwhelming. It's made my business successful today.
So is there anything else you'd like to add to let people who are listening know about the book and or the case or the work you're doing?
So the book is interesting because it gives a unique perspective of private investigators working with law enforcement, federal law enforcement. And I don't know of another book out there like that. So if you like true crime and you like some adventure and you like some corruption and you like some bad guys and you like some good guys, then it's a book that doesn't exist anywhere else. It has that uniqueness to it. From the perspective of what I want people to know about life today is if you've got a problem, you don't have to take the first answer you get. There could be many more answers that can help you with the situation. All three of us have become private investigators. Even our dear friend Larry is now a private investigator. So we understand, we get the kinds of cases and we see the kinds of things that can really help people. I mean, we're the plumbers of civil and criminal activity. We kind of know what to look for.
Larry, is there anything you would like to add to what Randy is saying or add to the conversation?
I tell you what he said, it was factual. I mean, it's right on. These two guys, these private investigators, what Randy is trying to explain to the public and to the audience, there is no other book out there. We don't sell that to try to sell books. We just want to tell a story that's a very unique story between a DEA agent and two PIs protecting each other from the corruption that we were dealing with on both sides of the border.
And that's an interesting fact by itself. There's so much corruption. And believe me, when we write this book, it's a portion of the corruption. What was really fascinating and unique is we couldn't trust a lot of the people Larry worked with. Larry couldn't trust a lot of the people Larry worked with. So not only did we have this
unique bond, it's a bond that was developed because we had a trust on each other.
Yeah, we knew we could trust each other. Yeah. So we didn't need somebody else to watch our back. Larry watched our back. We watched Larry's back. Couldn't help him in the office. So if he got screwed in the office, he's on his own. But if he was in the field, we could watch his back. Every bit as good as anybody else could. We kept each other safe. That was primary. But secondary was the integrity to get the job done. And yeah, it ruffled some feathers all the way to the top.
One last question. How can you relate what you just expressed about the connections of working with federal law enforcement as a PI and those kinds of connections? What can you add to what you said about life today and what's happening today?
Well, for starters, when you realize you can do something, and by that I mean we developed that relationship early on. I think because of our personalities, it was easier than it is other times, but we realized it can be done.
So what can you share for others who work in your field to help maybe with some of the issues that are coming up in today's world?
Well, be professional. That's a big key. Now, there's a lot of overlap between what we do and what law enforcement does. I have a missing person case right now that we have to work with the detectives from the sheriff's office that are working the case because the family wants us to. Now, that doesn't always mean that law enforcement is willing to accept that, but when you can be professional and when you can add to their assets, you can go a long ways and develop that relationship. We do have a good starting point of a relationship with the sheriff's office. So that's a positive sign that hopefully will develop into something great and get some things done. On a case like this, a missing person, if we're successful in any manner whatsoever, we will now have a lifelong bond with those detectives. That means trust builds. When trust builds, you can go to them to answer questions. They can come to you to ask questions, and you keep building that. And the more professional that we can be as licensed investigators, there's nothing that stops us from becoming one-on-one. And today, with all this political stuff going on and the defunding of police and police departments, believe me, they are going to start appreciating additional help as long as you can show that they can trust you. And trust is it. That's everything.
I'd like to thank Randy and also Larry for this interview. I think it adds a lot to what we have been working on, and hopefully others will learn from. Check out our website, LarryRayHardin.com. You can find our books, Fighting My Greatest Enemy, Myself, Path of the Devil, Camino del Diablo, and Home is Never the Same, on LarryRayHardin.com and on Amazon. Subscribe to our podcast, DEA Agent, Spiritual Journey, and other true crimes on your favorite podcast app.